When I say Holocaust survivor to you, what images come to mind? My students usually describe them as fragile, scarred, and traumatized victims who cannot recover. But that's not my perception. I see survivors as ordinary people who have lived extraordinary lives. They took charge of their recovery by reinventing themselves and learning new languages, trades, professions, and creating new families and communities. For example, they became shopkeepers, teachers, artists, community leaders, scientists, and even 9 Nobel Prize winners. My father worked in the garment trade, and here he is with one of his 8 great-grandchildren. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that survivors don't suffer from post-traumatic symptoms such as anxiety, depression, recurring traumatic memories, and a variety of medical conditions. Many people do, especially as they age. These are normal reactions to their traumatic experiences. However, by focusing primarily on their symptoms, we don't acknowledge their adaptive coping behaviors and resilience. Both the vulnerabilities and resilience coexist in most of the people I've worked with as a professional social worker. Genocide and war did not end with the Holocaust. Mass atrocities continue around the world. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees reports that in 2014, 60 million people were displaced by global armed conflict. The survivors of these atrocities need our help. Holocaust survivors are one of the oldest living populations of genocide, and they have much to teach us about recovery. Their achievements give hope and set an example for all survivors of traumatic life events. I learned about survivors' recovery and achievements through my personal and professional relationships with them. It began in childhood. My parents and their circle of friends were my first role models. Both my parents are survivors of the Lodz Ghetto and the Auschwitz death camp. My mother, Fela Zilberstein, was the only survivor from an extended family of 80 people. My father, Moshe Grachnik, was more fortunate. His 2 siblings and father survived out of a family of 25 people. Survivors' recovery began immediately after the war in the displaced persons camps of Europe. Some camps, such as Bergen-Belsen, were former concentration camps, where in one area bodies were being buried in mass graves, and in other areas activities flourished just weeks after liberation. They established schools, religious institutions, cultural groups, political parties, and published newspapers. They also married and gave birth to a new generation. My parents migrated to a DP camp in Schwandorf, Bavaria, and married in a simple ceremony in 1946, attended by family and friends. I was born the following year. As I was growing up, I remember my parents telling me that seeing lots of baby carriages in the camp was everyone's greatest satisfaction. I have pictures from this period, something that I'm told is quite rare. And here I am as an infant with my parents in the DP camp. And this is my favorite. The look on my mother's face makes me feel special and loved. My life's experiences within a community of survivors led to my master's research at the McGill University School of Social Work in 1987. This study identified survivors' contributions to the cultural and institutional development of the Montreal Jewish community. This study crystallized my ideas about survivors' recovery and achievements. From then on, I continued my life's work using a strength-based approach to practice. By focusing on survivors' inner strengths, their achievements, and coping abilities, despite their traumatic experiences, we begin to see them as survivors rather than fragile victims. This person-centered approach moves away from a deficit model of mental health to one that is competence and strength-based. Here's an example of how a strength-based approach can empower survivors. As a community social worker, I went into the homes of older adults to assess their needs. I found a distinct difference between survivors and older adults who did not live through the Holocaust. The survivors, especially those individuals who were isolated and lacked stimulation, were very much focused on their war experiences. They wanted to meet other survivors. So I helped them to form a group where they chose to organize an annual Holocaust commemoration service for the organization. They read their own poetry and prose, lit memorial candles, and said the traditional memorial prayers. This was the first time that beneficiaries of services provided a service for the organization by creating a memorable event. From this point forward, their caseworkers and entire management team saw them as capable and articulate individuals. And now let's talk about survivors' contributions. After the war, many immigrant survivors banded together and found a sense of belonging by organizing mutual aid groups. Members became each other's surrogate families, where they found the support that didn't exist in the general community. These groups accelerated their recovery by helping them to cope with their trauma, losses, and integration. The social and cultural activities gave their lives meaning and purpose. These groups served as a blueprint for a drop-in center for Holocaust survivors that I founded at the Cummings Center. This group trauma recovery model is suitable for a community agency. Making survivors feel welcome within supportive communities is crucial to their recovery. So is working with them collaboratively to provide services and programs that respect their culture and traditions. Survivors also understand and mentor other survivors of traumatic life events. For example, I connected a man with a concentration camp survivor after his family, his wife and 3 children, were killed in an airplane crash. This man wanted to meet with a Holocaust survivor because he knew that this survivor would understand his pain and feelings of hopelessness. This meeting infused him with renewed hope that eventually his life would have meaning again. Survivors also have a heightened sensitivity to human rights violations and advocate for legal safeguards that benefit all of humanity. In October 1960, a group of survivors were watching a CBC documentary about the rise of neo-Nazism in North America. They were shocked to learn that Nazi parties existed in Canada and right in their own communities. They quickly banded together and formed a delegation that met with representatives at Canadian Jewish Congress. They were told Canada's a democratic country with freedom of speech, and that there was nothing in the criminal code that prevents anyone from organizing a Nazi party. They were determined to prevent future genocides. So they formed the Association of Former Concentration Camp Inmates. And this organization spearheaded a campaign that culminated in the incorporation of anti-hate legislation into our criminal code in 1970. Another survivor, Raphael Lemkin, coined the term genocide and was the driving force behind the 1948 United Nations Genocide Convention, the first international law against mass murder of a nation or of an ethnic group. In 2005, an opportunity arose to create a dialogue between members of the Drop-In Center and volunteer interns from the Austrian Holocaust Memorial Service. The survivors refused to interact or to have a dialogue with these interns because they were the descendants of people who had perpetrated crimes against them, especially after they learned that one of the grandfathers of one of the interns had served in the German army. After gut-wrenching discussions, eventually a small group did meet with the interns as a sign of reconciliation with Austrian youth born after the war. The interns were eager to learn about survivors' experiences and assured them that upon returning to Austria, they would pass on their stories and advocate for Holocaust education in the schools. The survivors were pleased to play a role in educating them. This dialogue created a new paradigm, promoting peace and understanding between the generations. Survivors also helped found Holocaust museums, educational centers, and monuments around the world. They write memoirs and books, give oral testimony, and conduct historical research. Most importantly, as witnesses to history, they speak about their vision for a world that is free from racial intolerance, bigotry, and hatred. Baby carriages were important to my family and their friends because they symbolized hope and renewal. And that's what survivors give to all of us, hope and renewal. When you leave here today, I hope you'll think about survivors of genocide and see them as ordinary people who are capable of rebuilding their lives and contributing to society. People who have seen the dark side of humanity have much to teach us about adaptation and recovery. All we have to do is listen and accept their gift. Thank you.